Yeah. So, Ambassador, you had a chance today to listen to a lot of Ukrainian politicians. Of course, there is a campaign, it's the Ukrainian inner thing. However, you heard the president, you had the Yulia Tymoshenko, Hrytsenko, all the others. So, what is your point on how the elections are seen in the West, and what answers were given to you today?
Well, I think the elections themselves are considered credible, the first round, and everybody hopes the second round will be relatively clean as well. And I think that people celebrate the fact that Ukraine is a country that can have free and fair elections, and you don't know the outcome in advance. So it's a sign of progress on consolidation of democracy. That said, there's a lot of people wondering what exactly is the agenda for Volodymyr Zelenskiy, and particularly what will be his policy towards the West, towards NATO, and towards Russia. And just a lot of unknowns, so people are watching closely.
And what are exactly the question to be asked? Because there is this a bit of, I think, like at this point it looks already like a bit of the spin that there are no answers. But what are concrete questions the West would like to have the answers?
Well, people are interested in what he means when he says that he's ready to negotiate face-to-face with Putin over the Donbass, and also his view on the other international partners and how he intends to deal with the Donbass. There are questions about why he has proposed the referendum on NATO when it's already been settled in terms of the Constitution. Does this imply any differences between him and Poroshenko and other leaders on the future destiny of Ukraine?
As a former person representing NATO, what would you say? Because this question is often asked to Mr. Zelenskiy, and he says that I'm in favor of NATO, but the Ukrainian population should be consulted, which had been usually the case for many Ukrainian politicians. How these kind of things are seen from, because there is always a lot of inner politics in NATO's accession for many countries. I think it had been in many countries. How it's seen? Is it something that makes people angry, concerned, or the NATO would work with that anyways? Can you get us a bit more into that?
Yeah, well, the basic idea of having a referendum is a democratic procedure, which it's up to Ukraine to determine whether it's appropriate. President Poroshenko has talked about a referendum at the appropriate time, when Ukraine is actually submitting its application for membership a few years from now. So the question in everybody's mind is, there something different in Zelenskyy's mind? Is this seen as a way to slow down the train toward NATO, or to accelerate it? Nobody really knows what it means. But I think allies don't have any strong view about this. I think they all are sort of cautious about the issue of Ukrainian membership right now, simply because the war continues in Donbass. Russia is consolidating its control over Crimea, continuing to behave aggressively. So I think the focus is on supporting Ukraine's ability to defend itself in the immediate term, and to otherwise help Ukraine consolidate its democracy as the best solution to denying Russia any further gains in eastern Ukraine.
We're not discussing the Ukrainian election as they are. However, there are recent polls where, for instance, like today, were published that it's not even twice more, up to 60 to 24 chances that Zelensky would win. So instead of guessing who is, what are the requirements? What are the advice and actions awaited? Because there is more clarity that chances are very high there would be a change of leadership.
No, the polls are quite striking in how wide the gap is between the two candidates. That doesn't mean it can't change. 10 days is a long time in politics, and if the debates take place, they could shake things up a little bit in either direction. So nobody's considering it an absolutely foregone conclusion, but obviously it looks more likely than not that Zelenskiy is the next president, and that's why people really want to know more about where he stands on the issues.
So what are the things that the advice, not advice, what are the plans of the West anyways, because it requires some kind of planning and thinking ahead, not just being kind of concerned, and there is a chance you maybe won't get the questions within a couple of days, won't get an answers.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know concretely, but normally in a situation like this, when there's a high probability of a change in the leadership and maybe in the orientation, that both an embassy here in Kyiv and the foreign policy establishment back home will kind of develop a strategy for early engagement with the new leadership for a kind of an effort to address particular policy issues where we want to maintain solidarity, look at ways to steer the policies of a new administration in the direction of Western values and open economic relations. So I assume those kinds of contingency plans are being drawn up right now.
And final, during the panel, you actually mentioned some of the things. Doesn't matter what Ukraine has to do. It doesn't matter who is the leader. There would be the parliament election. What are they? What are these priorities? If you look at the path of the reforms, because now there are a lot of claims. It's very political. Were they successful? Were they not? How would you also assess what was successful, what's not, and what something still should be done?
Well, as I was saying during the panel, there's general disappointment in the West with the loss of momentum on reform and the fact that so many reforms have been left incomplete. For example, the new election code stuck in the second reading. We had this fiasco where the court struck down the illicit enrichment law, leaving a big void in the anti-corruption legislation. The High Anti-Corruption Court, the judges are still not appointed, and so that court, even though it was officially established months ago, is not functioning. The Prosecutor General's office clearly has lost a lot of its credibility. Change is needed there. There's a long list of things we'd like to see happen, and I think the main thing is we need to see much more commitment to reform across the party lines. There can't be the sort of partisanship that has contributed to this sort of deadlock on so many important reforms. That's where the new president hopefully can strike some kind of grand bargain with the leaders of all the political parties, or the majority of them, to have a broad pro-reform coalition. So this time Ukraine will succeed where it has repeatedly failed in the past.
Thank you.